In general, it seems like a fair move that both sides of an eviction would have a lawyer. I mean, really, it'd be better if the two sides could just sit down and work something out. But I guess that's not always the case. So if there is going to be a legal fight, let's make it fair. That, says one of the co-chairs of the local effort, is how Multnomah County ended up with this ballot measure.
This ballot measure is part of the nationwide right to counsel movement. It's modeled after very successful measures all across the country that have shown that when you provide free legal representation for tenants being taken to eviction court or at risk of displacement, in a surprising number of cases, you can keep that tenant housed until they can be stabilized.
The most prominent leader in the right to counsel movement, as it's called, is New York City. It passed a law back in 2017 to give access to free legal counsel to lower income renters facing some sort of an eviction. It pays for the program with taxpayer money. A recent posting by the city reports that 84% of tenants in eviction proceedings who had a lawyer through this right to counsel program avoided eviction. That's a pretty high number. That's the good news. The bad news, the program is now so popular and New York eviction battles so common that the program has struggled, and it's going to need a ton of new money to keep up and offer lawyers to everyone who needs them. So, okay, it's having success with those it helps in New York, which leads us right back here to the vote in Multnomah County. The measure has one of those crazy numbers for a name. It's called Measure 26238. But instead of taxing everyone, this measure is different. It would only tax people who have capital gains. That's a term for the profit that you make when you sell something, you know, like a property or a home or stocks or mutual funds, even digital currency. Now, this is not the first group to think of taxing those capital gains. The federal government has a capital gains tax. But unlike Measure 26238, the feds soften the blow. For example, they don't count the first $500,000 of profit when you sell your home if you're a married couple. But the wording of 26238 has no such exemption. It would tax everyone on every bit of capital gains they get. But John Bethencourt, the co-organizer we saw just a little bit ago, who's behind the measure, he says in practice, a similar exemption really would apply to the capital gains tax if it passes in Multnomah County. But it's not written in the measure, right? It literally does not say that.
Well, we refer to the federal tax calculations. We say, you know, capital gains as defined by the Internal Revenue Code. You know, and that's just the way people write ballot measures. You know, we wrote it in the same style of other successful ballot measures like the Portland Clean Energy Fund, which are written in brief, high-level language outlining the parameters of the program and the key features.
The tax would start at 0.75%, but it would be adjustable and it could go up or it could go down. On the other side of this argument, folks like the Portland Business Alliance say that tax would have a big and dramatic impact, even if it's unintended, on anyone at any income level trying to sell their home.
And so we got involved because here's a proposal that asks voters to raise taxes, and in large part on housing, in the middle of a housing crisis. And so it's our responsibility to stand up to proposals like this that may be well intended to help get tenants representation, but that impact the very thing that we know is driving our region to a place of unaffordability.
Those who are against it say the measure would hit homeowners who have seen their nest egg grow in their homes during the fast increases in value over the past several years. And then there is the question of the overall tax burden in Multnomah County. Voters in 2020 already approved a big income tax measure in the county that supports preschool for all, and a separate one for a metro tax for homeless services. The next year, more than 12,000 people, by the way, moved out of Multnomah County. Several groups have lined up to support the measure, including the Urban League of Portland, the Democratic Party of Multnomah County, and two major labor unions. On the other side, the Black Business Association of Oregon is against it, along with several elected leaders, including Congressman Earl Blumenauer, Metro's president, Portland's mayor, two county commissioners, and a whole bunch more. So, what are the chances of this thing passing? Well, I dialed up pollster John Horvick with DHM Research for his insights. His group asked about the measure late last year and found 40% were in favor, but 47% were against.
40%, if you sort of do a lot of campaign work and public opinion work at the beginning of a process, is quite low. Typically campaigns want to start with about 60% support for their issue because it's not unusual, particularly when a contest is contested, for support to erode as you get closer to election day. Now, that said, if we look back in history, voters in Multnomah County have been very generous when it comes to tax measures.
So traditionally, Portland voters love new taxes. The last time voters said no to a new tax was for a Portland school bond way back in 2011. So yeah, it's been a while. And by the way, the very next year, voters did approve that measure. But Horvik says the Multnomah County capital gains tax is running into tax frustration right now. Many living in the county feel that they're already paying too much tax for too little service. And this is a different sort of tax, by the way, that voters are not used to.
This is a new mechanism. So we're not only asking voters to say yes to a tax measure, we're asking them to say yes to a tax measure that they've never even considered before locally. Another is that this is to support a group of individuals who don't represent the majority of voters in Multnomah County. That is, it's meant to protect renters, not only renters, but renters who are at risk of losing their housing. The vast majority of voters in this May special election are going to be homeowners. They're going to be older. They're not going to be people who, for the most part, are going to feel like they're going to directly benefit from this. So the other piece is that the proponents of this are not nearly as well organized or as well resourced as the opponents of this.
Finally, he says turnout could be low. They often are for these elections that are held in May. That could also hurt the capital gains tax since it's typically younger voters, renters, who are absent when the turnout is low. Multnomah County told us today that every registered voter in the county should have their ballots by now, so it could be sitting in your mailbox if you haven't checked yet today. This proposal is on there, and hopefully now you have a better understanding of the issue before you cast your vote.